In the quiet suburb of Markham, Ontario, just northeast of Toronto, the Pan family lived in a well-kept two-story brick home on Burdale Court, near the intersection of Burr Oak Avenue and Kennedy Road. To the outside world, theirs was a model household, quiet, clean, and orderly. The lawn was always trimmed, the driveway always swept. Han and Bich Ha Pan, both Vietnamese immigrants who had fled the aftermath of the war, had carved out a respectable life in Canada through nothing but hard work and sacrifice. Han worked at Magna International, one of the world's largest automotive suppliers, as a tool and die maker. Bech, after several jobs, landed at a factory that made car parts. They weren't wealthy, but they had climbed out of poverty with discipline and relentless determination. Their two children, Jennifer and Felix, were raised under this same ethic. Success wasn't a goal, it was an expectation. Jennifer, their firstborn, was born in 1986 in Toronto. From the beginning, her parents poured everything into her. She was enrolled in piano classes by age 4. Figure skating came next. For nearly a decade, she trained 5 days a week, often at Markham Village Arena, in the hope that she might one day represent Canada in competition. But a knee injury ended that dream before it began. Still, her parents didn't relent. If it wasn't going to be sports, then it had to be academics. Jennifer attended Mary Ward Catholic Secondary School, a self-directed learning institution that allowed high-achieving students to manage their own coursework. It seemed ideal for someone as driven and intelligent as she was, or at least that's what everyone thought. Jennifer's teachers found her polite, quiet, and hardworking. But she wasn't the top student her parents believed her to be. She struggled in math and chemistry and became overwhelmed by the pressure to excel. Her classmates noticed that she was different, anxious, too eager to please, and seemingly terrified of disappointing anyone. At home, the expectations were suffocating. Bitch and Han didn't allow their children to attend sleepovers or parties. Dating was out of the question. Every moment was supposed to be spent studying, practicing piano, or preparing for a future they had meticulously outlined. Graduate high school with honors, attend Ryerson University, then transfer to University of Toronto for pharmacology. After that, a steady job, a stable marriage, and a quiet, respectable life. Jennifer never told them she wasn't meeting the mark. When her grades dipped in grade 11, she panicked. Instead of confessing, she began forging her report cards, cutting and pasting better grades into scanned copies and printing them out for her parents. They believed her without hesitation. When the time came to apply to university, she told them she'd been accepted to Ryerson. In truth, she'd been rejected. But the lie had already taken root, and she had no choice but to maintain it. Each morning, Jennifer dressed as if she were going to classes in downtown Toronto. Her parents dropped her off at Kennedy subway station, and she took the TTC line 2 as far as she needed, sometimes to a friend's house, sometimes just to wander the halls of a public library. She spent her days pretending to be a university student, carrying binders full of blank paper and fake syllabi. She went so far as to claim she had received a $3,000 scholarship from Ryerson. Her father, proud beyond words, bought her a new laptop. She said she was volunteering at Toronto's Sick Kids Hospital and even printed fake volunteer forms to show them. Later, she claimed to have been accepted to the University of Toronto's pharmacology program and to be working part-time at a local pharmacy. It was a performance layered with deception, and it went on for years. But Jennifer's lies weren't limited to her academic life. In high school, she had fallen in love with Daniel Wong, a classmate from Mary Ward, who was everything her parents feared. Daniel was laid back, partied often, and had been caught with marijuana on school grounds. He was of mixed Chinese-Filipino descent and came from a very different kind of family than Jennifer's. But he was funny, affectionate, and most importantly, he accepted Jennifer exactly as she was. To her, Daniel was escape. With him, she could laugh, she could breathe, she could be someone other than the perfect daughter. Their relationship deepened over the years, but it was always kept secret from Han and Bitch. Jennifer knew they would never approve. They had already chosen a different life for her, one that didn't include a boy like Daniel Wong. But secrets have a way of demanding space. Jennifer's life became a maze of lies, pretending to go to university by day, sneaking away to Daniel's apartment at night. She kept up appearances at home, but her world was built on sand. In 2008, after 4 years of this double life, everything began to unravel. One day, Han decided he wanted to attend her graduation from the University of Toronto. Jennifer panicked. She claimed the convocation ceremony was full and that she'd already received her degree by mail. Han grew suspicious. He called a family friend whose child actually attended the university, asking if they could verify her enrollment. There was no record of Jennifer Pan ever being a student there. The confrontation at home was explosive. Han and Bitch were devastated. They demanded answers. Jennifer confessed, not all at once, and not the full truth, but just enough to admit that she hadn't been in school. Her father's reaction was swift and severe. He banned her from seeing Daniel. He took her phone, disconnected her internet, and told her that from now on she would live under strict surveillance. For weeks, Jennifer complied. She stayed home, obeyed curfews, and acted like she was trying to rebuild their trust. But beneath the surface, she was unraveling. She began contacting Daniel again using a burner phone, a prepaid cell hidden in her room. She texted him late into the night. They met in parking lots, sometimes in Richmond Hill, other times near Pacific Mall in Scarborough, where they could disappear into the crowds. By now, Daniel had started seeing someone else, a girl named Christine. Jennifer couldn't handle it. She told him lies to pull him back, claiming she was being abused at home, that her father hit her, that her mother screamed at her. She even told him she had attempted suicide and had been hospitalized. None of it was true. Eventually, they were back together, and it was during this renewed connection that something dark began to form. They started talking about how to be together without her parents standing in the way. At first, it was a fantasy, a whispered thought in the dead of night. What if her parents just disappeared? What if Jennifer was free to love who she wanted, live where she wanted, and keep the house, the money, and the life she was promised, without the suffocating control? Jennifer, always a planner, began to turn the fantasy into a strategy. Through Daniel, she was introduced to a man named Lenford Crawford, known as Homeboy. He was part of a loose group of friends and acquaintances who bragged about street connections. Jennifer told them she wanted her parents gone. She was willing to pay. She had savings, she said. There would be more money after their deaths, life insurance, the family home, perhaps over $500,000 in assets. The plan was simple on paper. Jennifer would leave the front door unlocked. The intruders would enter the house at night. They would kill her parents. She would be tied up to make it look like a robbery gone wrong. No one would suspect the obedient daughter who had already been the victim of such a hard life. She believed it would be clean, quick, untraceable. The hit was scheduled, the plan set in motion. On November 8, 2010, Jennifer sat in her bedroom on Burdale Court, texting final instructions to the man who was on his way. Her father was downstairs watching TV. Her mother was getting ready for bed. Her brother Felix wasn't home. He was away studying at university. Jennifer sent one last text: VIP access unlocked. The door to the Pan family home was open, and the night of blood and betrayal had begun. On the evening of November 8, 2010, the Pan family home at 2319 Burdale Court in the quiet town of Markham, Ontario, was unusually still. The autumn air outside was crisp, the houses around them lit softly with porch lights. The kind of sleepy weeknight where nothing ever seemed out of place. Inside, Jennifer Pan sat in her upstairs bedroom, the blinds closed, the lights dim. Downstairs, her father Han Pan sat in the living room watching Chinese television. Her mother Bitch Ha was in the kitchen preparing for bed. Jennifer was calm, or at least she appeared that way. At precisely 9 p.m., she began sending final text messages on her prepaid burner phone. Short, emotionless instructions. She was communicating with a man she'd never met in person, a man who only knew her through her boyfriend Daniel Wong. He went by the nickname Homeboy. His real name was Lenford Crawford, and according to Daniel, he was someone who could solve problems for a price. Over the past week, Jennifer had been in constant contact with Crawford and two of his associates, David Milvaganam and Eric Carty. She had shared maps of the house, told them where her parents slept, and explained how the plan would work. She would leave the front door unlocked. They would enter after dark, stage a home invasion, tie everyone up, and then shoot her parents. Jennifer, she insisted, would also be tied up, but left alive. It would appear as if she had survived a violent robbery. And afterward, when the chaos settled and the insurance money came, she would be free. Free to live the life she wanted, with Daniel. Free of control, free of shame, free of the lies that had been choking her for years. At 10:02 p.m., Jennifer texted the final message that sealed her family's fate. VIP access is unlocked. That meant the front door was open. Outside, a black SUV had been circling the neighborhood. Burdale Court was quiet, tucked deep inside a residential maze. The house backed onto a small wooded ravine, not far from Kennedy Road and just minutes from Highway 407. The men knew the area. Jennifer had been specific. She had even told them where the security system was and that the garage light sensor would flicker when the front door opened. Everything was supposed to run like a scene in a movie. At 10:14 p.m., 3 armed men entered the house. They moved quickly and silently. One of them carried a .38 caliber revolver. They wore hoodies, gloves, and had their faces partially obscured. They confronted Han first. He had stood up from the couch, startled by the sound. Within seconds, he was dragged into the basement and beaten. Jennifer's mother screamed. She was pulled from the kitchen, pleading in Vietnamese. Jennifer came downstairs, her arms raised, acting shocked, terrified. "Please don't hurt us," she cried in a voice that wavered just enough to sound believable. But it was a performance. Her heart wasn't breaking, it was racing. The men forced Bitch and Han to sit on the couch while they ransacked the house. One of them took Jennifer upstairs and tied her to the stair banister with a shoelace, loosely enough that she could easily free herself later. She gave them $2,500 in cash from her room, claiming it was all they had. It wasn't. There were thousands more in the house, but this was never about money. Han Pan, though beaten in daze, started yelling. He told them to take anything but to spare their lives. He begged them to let them go. The men grew frustrated. They dragged Bitch and Han into the basement laundry room, cold, unfinished, and silent. Jennifer, now alone on the stairs, couldn't see what was happening, but she knew. 2 gunshots rang out, loud, final. It was 10:32 p.m. Bitch Ha Pan, shot in the head and shoulder, died instantly. She was found face down near the furnace, blood soaking the concrete floor. Han was shot in the face, but miraculously survived. Barely. Upstairs, Jennifer waited exactly 3 minutes before reaching for her cell phone. She called 911, her voice trembling. The recording would later become infamous. My dad just came home and I heard shots and someone broke in," she told the dispatcher. She sobbed. She screamed. She begged for help, but there were details that didn't add up. Her tone swung between hysteria and unnatural calm. She claimed she'd been tied to the banister the whole time and hadn't seen anything. When officers from the York Regional Police arrived at 10:41 p.m., they found Jennifer still attached to the stairs, but loosely. Her arms were above her head, a position no assailant would have left her in. Her phone was in her pocket, and she wasn't panicked anymore. Downstairs, the scene was chaos. Bitch's body lay cold and lifeless. Han, against all odds, was still alive, his face shattered by the bullet, one eye destroyed, but breathing. He was rushed to Sunnybrook Hospital in Toronto, clinging to life. The officers removed Jennifer from the house, covered her in a blanket, and took her to the station for a statement. Her story was rehearsed. She was the terrified daughter of 2 loving parents. She had no idea who would do such a thing. She didn't recognize the men. She had been dragged from her room, tied up, and left helpless. But detectives noticed something strange. Jennifer didn't ask if her mother had survived. She didn't ask where her father had been taken. She didn't ask anything. Still, the scene initially looked like a botched robbery. There were signs of forced entry. Electronics had been moved. A drawer was open. Jennifer was cooperative, emotional, and precise in her recollection. Almost too precise. Over the next few days, her father remained in a coma, and Jennifer was treated like a victim. She stayed with relatives in Unionville, a few kilometers away. She attended a memorial for her mother, wore black, and accepted condolences. She texted Daniel constantly. They talked about the future, but Daniel had begun to panic. He feared she had gone too far. He feared the police might know something. He began to pull away. Jennifer became unstable. She asked if he still loved her. She cried when he didn't reply. She even asked a mutual friend to help her find someone to kill Daniel so that he wouldn't talk. That friend went straight to the police. Meanwhile, a miracle occurred. Han Pan woke up. He couldn't speak at first, but when detectives visited him at Sunnybrook Hospital, he communicated with slow gestures and nods. And what he told them changed everything. He had seen Jennifer that night. He remembered being dragged to the basement. He remembered her walking around, talking to the men. She hadn't been screaming. She hadn't been tied up. She was calm, composed. There was no panic in her eyes. "I saw my daughter talking like a friend to one of the men," he said softly. The police brought Jennifer in for a second interview at the York Regional Police Major Crimes Unit in Aurora, north of Markham. This time they had questions. Why hadn't she been tied properly? Why hadn't the intruders taken anything of value? Why had the security system been disarmed? They let her talk. For hours. She wept, shifted, played the victim. But inconsistencies began to show. Her story changed in small ways. Detectives, especially Detective William Gutz, noticed that she kept asking what her father had said, what he remembered. It wasn't grief in her voice. It was fear. Still, there wasn't enough to arrest her. But Jennifer made a critical mistake. She kept texting Daniel Wong, even after being told she was under surveillance, even after her phone had been examined. Investigators tapped both their phones and watched as Jennifer began trying to cover her tracks, suggesting they delete messages, rewriting their timelines, and even rehearsing new versions of the story together. They had handed the police everything. By mid-November, police had surveillance, phone logs, and growing suspicion. But they needed one more thing, a confession. Not in court, not formally, just a slip, a crack in the performance. On November 22nd, Jennifer was brought in for what detectives told her was a final review of the case. This time, the tone was different. It wasn't friendly, it wasn't soft. She was told the investigation had revealed serious holes in her story and that her father had survived. That was when her face changed. She slumped in the chair. Her eyes darted, and finally she cracked. Not fully, not honestly, but enough. She admitted to hiring the men, but she claimed it was not to kill her parents. It was to kill herself. She had wanted to die, she said. She couldn't live under their control anymore. She was too ashamed. She couldn't face them. So she had hired a man to end her life. But instead, he had turned on her parents. It was a lie. Another one. But it was the lie that opened the door for what would come next. Police had heard enough. On November 22nd, 2010, Jennifer Pan was arrested at her aunt's home in Unionville. Daniel Wong, Lenford Crawford, David Milvaganam, and Eric Carty would all be arrested shortly after. The obedient daughter, the piano prodigy, the smiling student with dreams of medical school, had become the architect of her mother's murder. And her father, who had worked a lifetime to give her everything, now lived with a bullet permanently lodged in his face and a memory he could never erase. The moment he realized his own daughter had tried to have him killed. Long before bullets echoed through the basement of 2319 Burdell Court, the murder of Bitch Ha Pan had already begun, quietly, slowly, invisibly. It began not with violence, but with silence, with secrets, with the kind of lies that don't feel like lies at first, the kind that grow in the shadows, fed by shame, fear, and a desperate need to belong. After her arrest in late November 2010, Jennifer Pan sat in the interview room of the York Regional Police Headquarters in Aurora, a suburb about 20 minutes north of her family home in Markham. She wasn't crying anymore. She wasn't screaming either. Her voice had taken on a rehearsed calm, a softness. Her tone was fragile, but her words were chosen with care. She insisted again and again that she had never meant for anyone to die, that her intentions had been misread, that she had only wanted peace. But peace, in Jennifer's world, had never existed. The trauma wasn't born on the night of the murder, it was born in the years before. Inside the Pan household, love was conditional. It was measured in grades, awards, obedience. There were no warm hugs or easy smiles, no open conversations. Han and Bich loved their daughter, But their love came wrapped in expectations so suffocating that failure wasn't just disappointing, it was catastrophic. Jennifer had learned early on that her worth came from performance, not presence. Her piano recitals at Markham Piano Conservatory, her figure skating medals at Markham Village Arena, her school awards, all were met with proud smiles and tighter rules. When she failed a math test in grade school, her parents didn't console her. They made her do extra practice for hours. When she showed signs of social struggle, they told her to stop wasting time and focus harder. And when she began to falter emotionally, they never noticed, or perhaps they chose not to see. By the time she reached Mary Ward Catholic Secondary School, Jennifer had already begun editing herself to fit the mold. But high school was a different world. More pressure, more comparison, more cracks in the perfect image she had worked so hard to maintain. She wasn't the top student anymore. Her grades began to drop. She hid her report cards, she forged signatures, but each small lie was a survival tactic, a way to maintain her role as the golden child. And then came Daniel. She met him in 9th grade. He was laid back, charming, and emotionally open in a way that Jennifer had never known. He had a big laugh, a casual swagger, and an easy confidence that made her feel safe. He had grown up in Ajax, a town to the east of Toronto, and transferred to Mary Ward after being expelled from another school for marijuana possession. He wasn't what her parents wanted for her, but he was what she needed. Jennifer and Daniel fell into a teenage romance that was intense, volatile, and deeply codependent. They would sneak out together to Pacific Mall in Scarborough, hide in stairwells to talk, hold hands in the shadowed corners of school hallways. For the first time, Jennifer felt like she could breathe, but the freedom came at a cost. Her parents found out about Daniel near the end of high school. Han was furious. Bick was heartbroken. Jennifer was grounded for weeks. The rules became stricter. She wasn't allowed out after school. No phone, no texting, no privacy. But Jennifer had tasted freedom, and she wasn't going back. So she did what she had learned to do. She lied. She told her parents the relationship was over, that she was focusing on school, that she had learned her lesson. In truth, she and Daniel became more secretive, more reckless. When Jennifer was supposedly studying at Ryerson University, she was often in Daniel's apartment in Pickering, spending days under his blankets while telling her parents she was in class. They talked about their future, moving out, getting married, maybe opening a business. But they had no real plan, only fantasy, only dreams held together by texts and whispered promises. Still, the relationship wasn't perfect. Daniel began to drift. He started dating another girl, Christine. Jennifer couldn't handle it. She faked pregnancy. She claimed she had miscarried his child. She told him she was being beaten at home. She even pretended she had tried to kill herself by swallowing pills, texting him as she lay in a bathtub filled with cold water. Daniel, confused and overwhelmed, stayed in contact, but his feelings had started to erode. By early 2010, Jennifer was unraveling. Her double life was a house of mirrors. Her parents believed she was a pharmacy student at the University of Toronto. They believed she worked part-time at Toronto's Sick Kids Hospital. They believed she had a friend named Jennifer Lee with whom she studied every evening. None of it was real. Her phone was filled with fake texts from professors. Her emails were drafted to herself to maintain the illusion. Her bedroom in Markham was a stage. She had rehearsed every line. But one thing remained true: her hatred of her parents' control and her desperation to be with Daniel. That hatred became a seed. And when she learned her father was planning to forbid her from ever speaking to Daniel again, something inside her hardened. She told Daniel she couldn't take it anymore, that she needed out. Not just from her home, but from her parents entirely. At first, Daniel thought she meant moving out, getting a job, finding a place to live together. But Jennifer didn't want to lose everything. She didn't want to leave her house or give up her inheritance. She wanted it all: freedom, money, and love. And she believed there was only one way to get it: kill her parents. In the summer of 2010, the planning began. She asked Daniel if he knew anyone who could take care of things. He said he might. A man named Homeboy, real name Lenford Crawford, said he could do it for $10,000. Jennifer had saved some money working part-time jobs, and she promised more would come from the insurance after their deaths. They planned it meticulously. Jennifer created a map of the house. She explained where the valuables were, where her parents slept, which doors were left unlocked, and how the alarm system could be disabled. She practiced her cries. She tested how tight a shoelace had to be to look real, but still allow movement. They tried to schedule the hit multiple times. On October 31st, Jennifer told the men she was ready, but it didn't happen. The hitmen claimed they were delayed. Jennifer rescheduled. The second attempt was set for November 2nd. Again, it failed. Jennifer told them her father had decided to stay up late. They postponed. The final plan was made for Monday, November 8th. Everything went according to her blueprint, until her father survived. After her arrest, Jennifer tried to regain control of the narrative. She told police that the plan wasn't to kill her parents, it was to kill herself. She couldn't take the pressure anymore. She wanted it to end. She had hired someone to come to the house and take her out. That was the story she clung to. That was the only thread of innocence she had left. But no one believed it, not even Daniel. As investigators traced phone records, surveillance footage, and text messages, the truth became undeniable. Jennifer had orchestrated the murder. She had recruited the killers. She had staged the break-in. She had even chosen the time her mother would die. Her father, Han, meanwhile, had emerged from a coma with a face permanently altered by a bullet that had shattered his eye and jaw. He was moved to a rehabilitation center in North York, where he slowly learned to speak again. And when he did, he had only one thing to say about Jennifer: "She is not my daughter." For Han Pan, the betrayal was deeper than death. He had worked 30 years in a factory, lived modestly, denied himself comfort so that his children could thrive. And in return, his daughter had arranged to have him executed. After Jennifer's arrest, the extended Pan family, cousins, uncles, friends, cut her off. She had no visitors, no supporters. She was kept in isolation at Vanier Center for Women in Milton, 45 minutes west of Toronto, where she awaited trial. In private, Jennifer wrote long letters to Daniel, letters she could never send. She replayed their conversations. She thought about how close she had come to getting away with it. She convinced herself that if Han had died, none of it would have ever been traced back to her. And perhaps she was right, but he had lived, and with him, so had the truth. By the time the trial began in late 2014, Jennifer Pan had already been in custody for nearly 4 years. She had stopped crying. She no longer played the role of the grieving daughter or the confused girl caught in a storm too big to understand. In jail, she had become quiet, polite, withdrawn. She read books. She kept her head down. She didn't cause problems, but none of it mattered. The truth had already taken root. Not in a courtroom, but in the man she had failed to kill. Han Pan had survived a bullet to the face. The entry point had been just above his eye. The doctors at Sunnybrook Hospital in Toronto said it was a miracle. Not only had the bullet missed his brain stem by millimeters, but he had remained conscious long enough to describe what had happened. He had remembered his daughter speaking softly to the intruders. He had remembered the sound of her footsteps moving calmly across the living room. She hadn't screamed. She hadn't begged. She had been composed. His wife, Bitch Ha, had died in the cold basement of the home they had built together. The very home they had bought after 20 years of working back-to-back shifts in auto factories. They had chosen Burdell Court for its quiet, tree-lined streets and its proximity to Unionville High School, hoping their daughter would grow up in safety, surrounded by opportunity. They had dreamed of nothing but good things for her, and she had repaid them with gunshots. For Han, the emotional injury was deeper than the bullet wound. He didn't speak publicly in the aftermath. While the media exploded with coverage, while true crime shows began building their future scripts around Jennifer's story, Han stayed away from cameras. He was recovering in a rehab center in North York, then living under protection with relatives in Richmond Hill. His face had to be reconstructed. He lost one eye. He had trouble eating for months, but the physical pain was nothing compared to what came next. He had to learn how to live without his wife, and how to live in a world where his daughter, the girl he had carried as a baby, whose piano recitals he had attended, whose skating lessons he had paid for every week, had been behind it all. Jennifer, after her arrest, had tried once to reach him, through a letter, through whispers, through secondhand messages. Han never replied. He refused to see her, refused to speak to her, and eventually he told the police, "She is dead to me." At Vanier Center for Women, Jennifer became something of a mystery. Inmates whispered about her. Guards watched her closely. She was not violent, not loud, but there was something about her that unsettled people. Not because she was angry, but because she wasn't. She folded laundry, she cleaned. She smiled faintly when spoken to. She was so quiet, so controlled, that it made some staff uneasy. Daniel Wong, meanwhile, was being held at Maplehurst Correctional Complex across the street. He stopped writing to Jennifer. He never visited. After his arrest, he confessed pieces of the plot, not all of it, but enough. He blamed Jennifer for escalating things, for turning a fantasy into a plan, for paying the men, for orchestrating the timeline. And though he had been involved from the beginning, he quietly distanced himself from her. Jennifer, now isolated from everyone, began to collapse internally. She stopped eating. She became underweight. Her hair thinned. Her fingernails, once perfectly painted, began to crack and bleed. When asked how she was, she always gave the same answer. "I'm okay." But she wasn't. She was living in the wreckage of a fantasy. The fantasy that she could live two lives and never be found out. That she could erase her parents and keep the inheritance. That she could fake being a victim and escape all responsibility. But the truth had caught up to her, and now all she had was time. Meanwhile, Han Pan made one final decision. He returned to the house on Burdell Court just once, escorted by police. The blood had been cleaned, the furniture removed, but the memories remained. He stood in the basement, looked at the floor where his wife had died, and closed his eyes. He sold the house within a month, moved away from Markham, and never returned. He also made another decision, a private one, but devastating in its meaning. He legally disinherited Jennifer. She would receive nothing, no money, no property, no photos, not even a letter. In interviews with detectives, he expressed his grief not as anger, but as sorrow. "I lost my wife. I lost my daughter. I lost everything I built," he said quietly. Friends described Han as a shell of the man he had once been. He had once been proud, energetic, always on time, always working. After the attack, he aged a decade in months. He rarely left the house. He spoke only when spoken to. But beneath the silence was a kind of strength. He had survived, and that was not nothing. In 2015, Jennifer and her co-conspirators were formally sentenced to life imprisonment. But by then, the public spectacle had long passed. The court had become just a formality. What mattered was not the sentence. What mattered was how the lie had spread like a virus, infecting everyone it touched. In the years that followed, Jennifer faded from the spotlight. She did not give interviews. She did not write a book. She did not confess further. Her time in Vanier became a pattern of days. Wake up, count, eat, work, read, sleep. She would be eligible for parole in 25 years, possibly in her early 50s. But she knew better than to hope. She had no family to return to, no friends left. Her name had become poison in Markham. Even those who had once called her a sweet girl, a polite student, a bright light, had turned away in disbelief. And still, she kept a photograph in her cell. One photo, the only one she hadn't destroyed. It was of her as a child, sitting between her mother and father on a couch, smiling in a pink dress, holding a piano certificate in her lap. The photo had been taken in the same living room where she had unlocked the front door for the men who would end that life forever. A perfect daughter, a perfect lie.